Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Sophia, your host. We're here with a new series called Misunderstood Verses of the Quran. I'm with Dr. Shabir. Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
All right, Dr. Shabir, let's dive into this series. But first, to begin, maybe you can talk about why we've chosen to do this series. And one reason I should begin with is that somebody requested it of us. Somebody who's been watching our videos constantly said, can you do a series on misunderstood verses in the Quran?
So, commentaries on the Quran have been like a mainstay of Muslim civilization. There have been massive commentaries, numerous commentaries in Arabic and now in English. And of course, I imagine in various languages of the world. People want to understand the Quran. Muslims want to understand it because they want to know God's message for them. Non-Muslims are curious. They want to understand the Quran. So people are reading the commentaries. Of course, first translation and then the commentaries. And we can go systematically commenting on each and every verse, but that takes a long time. Are there some verses which, have been interpreted in a certain way and people are familiar with the popular interpretations, but the interpretations are perhaps on shaky ground? So we need to be watchful of those. It's almost like a list of errata. We need to know where the errors are so we avoid them or we know how to overcome them. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's where this negative sounding title comes from, the misunderstood verses of the Quran, so that we can quell the misunderstandings, remove doubts, and so on.
I guess we always think of non-Muslims coming and saying, oh, your verse says this and your verse says that, and we're going to correct them and tell them, no, they're misunderstanding it. But sometimes Muslims themselves can misunderstand the verses and what they mean.
Yes. In fact, a quick search will bring up many sites that have articles listing some most misunderstood verses of the Quran and so on. And often there are verses that deal with the question of peace and violence. And these verses are misunderstood not only by non-Muslims who are looking in from the outside and thinking, well, wait a minute, it looks like your book is a violent book. But it's also misunderstood by Muslims themselves, especially some youth who want to set up an Islamic state somewhere in the world. And they capitalize on these verses for their own political agendas or their own, dreams of their illusions of grandeur, right? And they seize on the same verses and they're pursuing a violent sort of agenda, and that makes the religion look bad. So it's Muslims themselves who might misunderstand, at least at this popular level. But some of the misunderstandings, Sophia, go very deep. They're in the classical commentaries on the Quran, and one reads these commentaries with a great deal of admiration and respect. I do, because it's even hard for me to imagine how the writers from hundreds of years ago were able to spend the time with their primitive writing materials and so on. When I say primitive of today, we can easily go with our word processors and computer systems. We can save our file, come back to it the next day. It's right there, ready. We can even keep it on the desktop and we're ready to keep writing. Mm-hmm. We can have it on a drive that is accessible wherever we are. So whether we're using our smartphone at one moment or the laptop another moment or desktop the third time, we have access wherever we are to the same files. We can check, edit, modify. We have spell checkers and so on. But so how did the writers hundreds of years ago write these massive volumes? This is quite, we have to say it's by the grace of God. So we have respect and admiration for them and a great deal of knowledge that they must have stored in their mental storages, and how they reproduced all of this in a systematic way and so on. When we say systematic, with the modern word processors, you can easily go, add something and insert it here, cut it and bring it down to the bottom. You can rearrange things easily. Imagine when all they had were pen and paper, how did they reshuffle things? They had to work it out in their minds, because paper wasn't cheap either. It's not like they can play the office game of trying to drop the waste paper into the waste paper basket from a distance, right? Mm-hmm. Paper was not something they would want to waste. They would conserve. So So anyway, a lot of respect for the classical writers is due, but they at the same time should be recognized for the human beings that they are, as we are. They worked in a certain milieu. Certain ideas were popular in their times, and they latched onto those ideas. And then they forced the verses of the Quran to fit within those ideas, because when they thought that something is true, they thought that the Quran must be teaching the same true thing. And so if the verse looked like a little bit off, they would, shave it a little bit in order to make it fit, stuff it into the paradigm that they accepted.
So, Dr. Shabir, how do we, more than 1,400 years later, decide which verses are misunderstood and which aren't?
We don't have to decide. We can read the Quran, and we analyze the Quran with new lenses, with new paradigms. We understand the world in a different way than our classical authors did, and some of this understanding may be good, some may be bad. We have to be always self-critical and not accept everything from our modern world without criticism. At the end, bear responsibility for the minds that God is giving us to exercise, and then whatever our conclusions, we have to be faithful to God in reaching them, and we have to face the consequences of the truth that is becoming evident to us. And based on that, we can see that in some cases, and in most cases, they hit the nail right on the head, and we're benefiting from the knowledge that came before us. In some cases, it looks like something has been force-fitted to fit a certain paradigm which does not commend itself to us. So far we've been speaking in generalities. We'll have to come to the specifics and look at verses of the Quran that I feel have been misunderstood, even in the classical commentaries. And then we will try to explain how, from a modern perspective, we can see that the commentaries need a certain revision at key points. By doing so, we will be embracing the Quran as the Word of God to us, speaking to us in our present time, in a language that we can understand, with concepts that ring true to us.
I look forward to the series, Dr. Shabir, and I look forward to learning, because I don't even know what these misunderstood verses are. So I'm excited to discover what they are.
And it'll be an exciting journey for me as well, to think more precisely about the verses of the Quran and to examine them vis-a-vis popular perceptions of what the verses actually teach.
All right. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
The most effective, the most far-reaching dawah we can do these days is on social media. At Muslim Media Hub, we're harnessing the power of media to spread the message of Islam. Want to get some reward from God? Support this mission. Check us out at muslimmediahub.com.